Good morning. Welcome to CATEX-TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. This is a live broadcast from Princeton, New Jersey. Today is Wednesday, October 20th, 2010. It's 11:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in the U.S. It's 4:30 p.m. in London. In Hamilton, it's 12:30, and in Mexico City, 10:30. If you need to reach us during the broadcast, you can phone in toll-free at 1-866-67-CATEX. Overseas, our AOL instant mail address is CATEX-TV. Just before we came on the air, the Insurance Insider reported that a U.S. District Court judge in Florida had refused to dismiss the case against a number of Lloyd's syndicates who were all involved in Florida excess and surplus line sales. It's a class action suit. That's all we know about this. We're unable to obtain any more information about the court decision. If we find anything more during the broadcast, we'll tell you. There is some breaking news. Hong Kong is at the epicenter of a very, very strong Typhoon Maggie, which is churning toward the former Crown Colony right now with winds of about 125 miles per hour. The storm has already caused havoc in Luzon in the Philippines. It killed at least 19 people. The storm is expected to make landfall in the southern province of Guangdong on Saturday, so they have plenty of time to prepare for it. The Chinese are saying that we expect that the strong winds and torrential rain brought by Maggie will increase the probability of geological disasters such as floods, land, and mudslides. Fishing boats have been ordered to return to port. Other ships have been told not to leave the port. The Xinhua news agency is saying that Guangdong, which is Hong Kong, could see storm-triggered waves of up to 21 feet in height. Reservoirs and hydroelectric stations in Guangdong have been put on high alert. Not good. Go to our other stories. The legendary American broker Ted Blanche, pictured here. It's odd that somebody that well known in the industry who can only find that one old black and white photo of him, apparently is leaving Tiger Risk and moving to Goss Insurance Brokers in Dallas, Texas. Blanche, Mike Cashman, and Dan Case are moving along to Goss as well. Blanche, of course, succeeded his father in the leading role at E.W. Blanche Company, a highly successful broker in the 70s and 80s. Under his leadership, Blanche cultivated several generations of leaders in the reinsurance industry, one of whom, of course, was Rod Fox. Cashman served 22 years with Blanche. He rose to become president and chief operating officer. Later, he went to Aon. Mr. Case has served in various roles in the reinsurance industry, including banker, investor, and intermediary. He joins Goss Re from Tiger Risk. Scott Brock is the CEO of Goss Re. Now, Mr. Brock himself is, I believe, a former son-in-law of Ted Blanche. Goss itself is owned by a holding company called the U.S. Intermediaries. Let's make sure we can get this straight. It's actually the U.S. Risk Insurance Group. U.S. Risk Insurance Group is Goss Re's parent company. So everybody's professing great joy to be back combined with each other, rejoining their efforts together and going out and attacking the world. But that's interesting news. Mr. Blanche is still a force to be reckoned with. Well, how'd you like to get a €100 million check in the mail, not knowing that it was coming? Hanover Re did. They received a €100 million windfall following a ruling by Germany's federal tax court. A legal dispute had arisen about whether investment income generated by Hanover Re's Irish domiciled subsidiary should be taxed at the German parent company tax level or the Irish tax level. The parent had planned to have it taxed at the higher level, so they had set aside sufficient provisions to pay that tax. However, the court decided that it would be taxed at the subsidiary level, so those provisions are no longer needed and will be released. This release will boost Hanover Re's third quarter and full year 2010 net income by about €100 million. Here's Peter Harmer. He got a big job with Insurance Australia's Group CGU's unit. He's going to replace Duncan West. He's resigned for family reasons. CGU is one of Insurance Australia Group's intermediary-based operations in Australia. Harmer had been CEO of Aon Australia for 7 years. before becoming Aon's CEO in the UK in January of 2007. In June of 2009, he resigned. He announced his intention to return to Australia, and he's now popped up here. Well, look at this picture. The man in the middle is George Osborne. He's the Chancellor of the Exchequer. On the right there is Nick Clegg. He's the Deputy Prime Minister. I don't see Prime Minister Cameron, although I'm sure he's not ducking this, but the bad news is being delivered by Exchequer Chancellor Osborne, and he said that the UK will cut 490,000 public sector jobs over the next 4 years because of austerity measures that, quote, are unavoidable when the country has run out of money. Osborne said, "Today is the day that Britain steps back from the brink. It's a hard road, but it leads to a better future." He has ordered $130 billion US in spending cuts by 2015, aiming to reduce Britain's deficit of 11% of its GDP to around 2% of its GDP within 5 years. Also, take note of this, France, the measures will hit the welfare state, pushing the state's pension up to 66 years old by 2020. Of course, protests against the cuts are scheduled to take place in London and in cities across the country later on today. Actually, they're occurring right now. The National Health Service, schools, and overseas aid are still protected under the spending review. The Defense Acts fell the other day, and we did report on that. Well, some news from Boeing. They've posted an $837 million third quarter profit this morning, and they've raised their profit guidance for the full year. They sold more planes. Boeing said they've already made plans to raise production rates on the 737s. The improved 2010 guidance, they say, reflects a strong outlook for commercial airplanes. Boeing expects to deliver 460 new commercial planes this year. They also say that they're continuing to work to deliver the first 787. 787, that's around here somewhere, isn't it? It's only 2+ years late. And they're also working on delivering the 747-800. That's also late. Boeing's revenue for the quarter that ended on September 30th rose 2%, up to about $17 billion. Analysts had been expecting about $16.8 billion. Stock market after a bad day yesterday is up about 130 points right now. We'll go to a word from our sponsors. We had 2 earthquakes in Mexico at about 2 o'clock this morning, Mexican time. Here they are. They're in the Gulf of the California Gulf. The first came in at about a 5.9. The next one hit a few minutes later. That was a 5.5. There have been no damage or injuries reported, but apparently it was felt on both sides of the Gulf. Atlanta-based Graco Children's Products and the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission are recalling 2 million baby strollers because of strangulation and entrapment risks. The recall follows reports of at least 4 strangulation deaths linked to the strollers. Children have also become entrapped in the strollers, resulting in cuts and bruises. When unharnessed, a baby can go through the opening between the stroller tray and the seat bottom, and his or her neck can become trapped and strangulation can occur. The recall includes older versions of Graco's Quattro Tour and Metrolite strollers. They were sold between November of 2000 and December of 2007. They were sold at outlets such as Babies R Us, Sears, Kmart, Target, and Walmart. The strollers were manufactured in China. Our friends at Cathedral Syndicate have some good news. Cathedral Syndicate's 2010's disciplined underwriting and historically strong results have allowed AM Best to affirm its syndicate rating of A, excellent, as well as its issuer credit rating of lowercase a+. Cathedral is set to report a combined ratio of 90 to 95% in 2010. That's pretty darn good this time at times, despite suffering from average above natural catastrophe losses experiences in the first half. Best also affirmed Cathedral Capital's issuer credit rating of BBB+ and the debt rating of BBB on its 10 million and 12 million euro floating rate subordinated notes. Good for John Hamblin and company. News from Brussels, just in. The European Commission outlined radical measures this morning to deal with banks that run into trouble. The goal is to get shareholders and creditors to pay the bill, not taxpayers. The EU proposed that supervisors of such banks be allowed to suspend dividends, replace managers themselves, or force asset sales to spare governments the, quote, terrible dilemma, unquote, of having to decide whether or not the bank was too big to fail. The EU Internal Market Commissioner, Michel Barnier, proposed a pan-European system that would allow for the orderly winding down of a troubled bank and leave the cost with investors rather than the public. At the height of the credit crisis in 2008, European governments scrambled to bail out banks such as the Netherlands' Fortis Bank and Belgium's Dexia Bank. The Commission wants to propose specific legislation by the spring. Plans are likely to face stiff opposition from the bank. They'll also require some coordination with countries outside the EU because many of these banks that operate in Europe are based elsewhere. Here's some news from Lloyd's. Stuart Randall, pictured here, who formed Ataraxia Broking, is now setting up a Lloyd's insurer to exclusively underwrite business for its acquisitions. Insurance Times is reporting this. The new insurer arm, which will be called Ataraxia Markets, will begin underwriting from the Lloyd's building next month. Randall founded Ataraxia Broking 5 months ago to buy up small brokers, and he said that the new insurer would only accept business placed by its acquired brokers. That would be called a MGA outfit with cover holders descended onto the brokers. Good for him. That's a pretty good business model these days. Well, in France, everybody should be getting on their knees thanking Baron Haussmann's fortunate decision in the late 19th century to pave over the cobblestones in Paris when he redesigned the city. Cobblestones, of course, were used historically by strikers and protesters in France to build barricades and to hurl at police and gendarmes and soldiers. There's nothing to dig up anymore. Workers around France still protesting this retirement vote have now blocked access to a number of airports. They're smashing store windows. There are tear gas battles going on with the police. President Sarkozy is back in France now after his meeting with Angela Merkel and President Medvedev of Russia. Riot police in black body armor forced striking workers away from fuel depots in western France. They've restored gasoline service to gas stations where pumps had been dry. Again in the Paris suburb of Nanterre and also in Lyon in the south, tear gas was sprayed, but they appeared unable to stop the violence. Sarkozy vowed that his Conservative Party would pass the reform, raising the retirement age from 60 to 62 in a Senate vote now expected tomorrow. It had been scheduled for today. Many workers feel that the change would be the first step in eroding France's social benefits, which include long vacations, contracts that make it hard for employers to lay off any worker, and a state-subsidized healthcare system. The French fear that this is going to go the way of all flesh and be replaced with something called, quote, American-style capitalism.